Hello! I hope everyone can hear me. Please let me know if you can hear me. Hello, Lori and Corvus and young Kale Boy and good vibes from the hospital for reasons. Excellent, that's good news. My name is Heather. I'm here from Beading Dreams in Dallas, Texas, and hey ladies, I'm streaming! Sorry, we have a lovely, wonderful group of Champagne ladies here tonight, and we love them, but they are getting excited. I just made them sing to my brother, so I did contribute to the problem, but it's his birthday, and he deserved an awesome song, because he's fantastic. And those of you who have heard about my brother know how awesome he is. So it is his birthday today, so he is not watching because he's making steak for himself for his birthday dinner. But I am Heather. I'm here from Beading Dreams in Dallas, Texas, and I'm always contributing to problems. Good vibes. Allison is up front with the Champagne ladies. She is here. She's feeling good. She's got no family here in town, so it's just me and the stream, and today we are going to make a really fun variation on the bracelet that I made last week. Not that one, that's the wrong one. This is the one. So this is the one that I made last week, and it is made with square wire, 20 gauge square wire, 20 gauge twisted wire, and 20 gauge half round wire. And we are doing this variation, so it's a very similar style, but you use a continuous piece of wire to wrap. So you can do lots of variations on this theme, and you have to have some binding wire to keep everything together, and we prefer to use 20 gauge half hard if possible, because that gives you the spring that you need to make this function. But you can use all kinds of different things in this. It's awesome. So I've got my twisted square wire, and I've got my untwisted square wire, and I am going to just take the time to smooth the untwisted square wire through my fingers so I can get it to where it is not twisted. That part is important. And I've got my measuring device here. This is my fancy tape. Obviously very, very well loved. So what I need to do is I need to mark, this is a 16-inch piece of wire. For this project, 16 inches of the two types of wire is standard. You can make a smaller bracelet with more, a smaller bracelet with less, or a bigger bracelet with more if that is more your size. But a 16-inch length is fairly standard for this particular bracelet. Now, I'm not going to be able to get this completely in focus because you either get focus on the table or slightly above the table, and since most of this is going to be not on the table, I have chosen to focus above the table. So I am marking the middle of my square wire, so at the 8-inch mark, and I'm marking on more than one side because sometimes it turns out that the side you marked it on is not the ideal side. And I've got a 16-inch piece of my twisted square, and I'm going to mark the middle of that as well. And all of this has a little bit of fudge room, so if you are sometimes you make a slightly different size, but it's within 1/4 of an inch, and that'll still fit almost everyone. Good majority of people for this. And this is, as you could see earlier with the sample from last week, this is a faux bangle. So this is a great project for people who like to wear bangle bracelets but don't have a very collapsible hand, so they can wear a much smaller bangle bracelet with a clasp on it. So with my twisted square wire, I'm going to start out with my round nose pliers, and I'm going to put the twisted square wire into my round nose pliers, and you're not really going to be able to see this, unfortunately, because I have to be able to look down at it. But what I'm essentially doing is I am putting the line that I made on my wire. I'm going to try to show you what I'm doing. Sorry, I have to move my preview screen so I can see what I'm showing you. There. So you can see the line that I drew, and you can see that it's centered in my round nose pliers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bend the two ends of my wire, and I can't do that on the camera because I have space limitations, but what I'm making is a very long U with my wire. So when it comes out of my round nose pliers, I want that mark to be in the center of the U that I made. Bye, Sally! And if the ends are even, amazing. If the ends are not even on this one, it's super easy to change that. All you have to do is whichever leg is shorter. If one is, then you want to rotate slightly around to the shorter end and just rotate the longer end to follow it. So that's how you adjust if you have one leg that ends up longer than the other on the U one. Now I've got my V bend, and I'm going to use my chain nose pliers for this. So I'm going to put my chain nose pliers slightly on the dominant hand side of my mark. So for me, that's my right hand. So I'm going to put that slightly on the right hand side of my mark, and then I'm going to bend at a 90-degree angle. And the ideal that we want here is for your mark to be right there in that corner. And if you cannot get the mark right there in that corner, it's easy to fix this part. This is not too late. So all you have to do is put that bend into your chain nose pliers and kind of squish it out and start again. Because this is 20 gauge wire. You get a redo or two and you're going to be fine. If it is pretty close, then just go with it, because you've got at least 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch of wiggle room. So what we're going to do with this is we are going to use our fingers and our chain nose pliers, and we are going to tighten this completely down. So it is, because the first variation we did of this actually had beads in the middle. That is an excellent question, young cowboy. These are chain nose pliers designed for jewelry making. So in these, there are no grooves or ridges whatsoever, because most of the metals that we use for jewelry making are much softer than the pliers are. And if you add enough pressure with your jewelry making pliers on your wire, then you might end up with tool marks, which is not ideal in this particular type of application. So most jewelry making pliers are designed not to have teeth or grooves in them. If they do, then you may be using them with steel wire or something else that's really sturdy like that. In this case, we are not using them with steel. I am using today bronze wire for my square and my twisted wire, and I'm using copper wire for my half round wire. So I'm also just making sure as I do this tightening down that I am keeping both of my sides of my V piece lined up, so I have this one, the same side on top all the way down. And ideally, I should be able to, I'm just using my fingers kind of to smooth things out, just so they want to kind of stay together, because the more work you do in your prep, the less work you have to do in your actual execution, which is nice. So I am just making sure that everything's all straightened out. And now I'm going to employ my secret weapon, which is tape. Painter's tape is wonderful for this because it releases a little bit more easily than masking tape. Masking tape is also awesome. If you do not have either of those tapes available, Scotch tape will also work just fine. Ideally, if you have just regular tape, your best bet is going to be the kind that is not clear, but the kind that's kind of a matte or satin finish, because that kind you can tape on and just kind of rip off a lot more easily than the clear finish, which is nice when you are dealing with this kind of thing. So I've got a couple pieces of tape ready to go, but I am not going to put them anywhere just yet. Rune, hi! Hello, love, how are you? Allison will say hi as soon as she knows that you are on. Rune is on! I don't know if she heard that or not, but I will tell her. And hi, I've missed you. I love you so much. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to line these two pieces up, and I'm going to make sure that the open ends are on opposite sides. So the open ends of the U side and the open ends of the V side go in opposite directions. And the V side goes in the middle. That part is important. So I know that was not easy to see, but what I'm doing is I'm just lining everything up. Love, laugh, toaster bath. Okay. I mean, as long as you're here, that is the important thing. So I've got everything kind of lined up. That looks good. And my U side is not too big because we don't want it to be huge enormous and try to keep everything together. Although I think I'm going to take the time to make it a little bit smaller because it is, again, I am very used to making the bling bangle version of this where I do actually have beads inside this one. So I'm used to making a larger setup than this. So I just used my round nose pliers on a smaller part of the taper. So these have tapering tips like ice cream cones, and they do make a really nice round, lovely loop, or partial round, lovely loop. So I just made my loop smaller is really all I did. And I'm going to put this back inside and scooch it all back together. And it is not going to be super visible because, once again, I don't have enough hands to do editing on the fly while I'm already using both hands. Now, if someone can use AI to give me a retractable third hand, preferably without 6 fingers, that'd be great. Today we are making a square wire wrapped bangle, and it's going to have the same metals as this one at the bottom, but be this design. And I'm using bronze wire and copper wire. So now I've got everything kind of lined up. I have the ends of the V wire, the one that's squished down more, as close to the end of the U as I can get without overlapping. And what I'm going to do is I am going to tape these together. And I'm just going to make a tape flag. It's so fun to make. I will freely admit that. This was not a tough sell to have me teach this. So what I'm doing is I'm folding my tape over. I'm not wrapping it around so I don't make a bundle or anything. I want to make sure that everything stays all put together. So I want to also make sure that I am kind of squishing to make sure that the tape sticks to all of my pieces. And I'm going to put a second piece of tape not far away from that one. So the tape is really just to make sure everything stays where it should be. We're going to start from this end, the U end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my fancy measuring device here. And I am going to use a Sharpie. I'm going to mark every 1/2 inch. And I'm going to mark every 1/2 inch on the square wire that is not twisted, because that is just so much easier to write on. And really that is the sole reason that is happening. And you'll notice that I'm also marking on my tape where I have that. And it's okay to make a nice long mark on your tape so it extends beyond your bracelet, because when you get to the tape part, you're going to want to kind of tear it so you can mark it underneath the tape as well. All right, so I have 1/2 inches marked all the way down. You can see that I have it marked on the tape and everything. So now I need a piece of 1/2 round wire, and I'm going to use the same piece of 1/2 round wire for this entire project. So I'm going to give myself 3 feet to start or so. I am not measuring this very strenuously because this is copper 1/2 round wire and we buy it by the pound. So that is not something you have to really worry overly much about. I would recommend working with copper to practice with. Copper, however, does add its own challenges because this is definitely not, it's very soft. It's extremely soft. So if you are one of those people who kind of really loves wire, it's possible that copper is not for you, because if you tend to wad up wire, and I just threw that piece on the ground, so I'm going to cut myself another piece, but if you tend to overly manipulate wire, you might be better off using silver wire, sterling silver wire. I mean, you can buy it by the pound, Corvus. It's just, you're gonna pay for it by the pound. I threw the copper wire on the floor, so I'm getting myself another piece because, again, we have a lot of this. So be gentle with the copper wire is what I'm saying. So I am going to use my chain nose pliers to make kind of a hook in my 1/2 round wire. You want to make sure that you are working, and the point of using 1/2 round wire is not just because it's pretty and decorative, but also because it has a flat side, which will actually give you more friction to bond this together. So I want to make sure that I'm using my rounded side on the outside and my flat side touching my other wire. And I'm going to begin with my hemostats as well. So these are hemostats or needle drivers or forceps. It depends on, so and in the nursing profession, I have been told that these are called needle drivers. These are called hemostats in the beading world, but that doesn't mean that the beading world is always correct, because the beading world tends to borrow useful tools from lots of other worlds and use them for our own nefarious purposes. These did not have a nylon tip on them. I prefer to use nylon tips for this particular project or type of project because they're squishy and therefore they hold the wire nicely without making tool marks. But since these are just straight metal, I just made my own tips out of painter's tape. So I am going to place them on my wire and try to keep my wire fairly close together when I do that. And these do lock, so I can lock them in place and just make sure that everything is where I want it. So I am going to hook my 1/2 round wire over, and I prefer in this particular project and all of the projects of this ilk to rotate my bracelet rather than rotate the wire, because what that does is I can control which side of the wire is facing up, so I can make sure that I'm keeping the half round side up, the rounded part up, and that I am keeping the flat side toward my actual piece that I'm making, trying to bind together. So I'm going to start out with 3 wraps at the end. So it's going to be, I'm going to have the hook and 2 wraps around, and then I have the back side. So once I have wrapped around, and you're going to have an extra wrap at each end, just because you just want a little extra at the end to make sure everything stays put. So now I've wrapped around, and what I'm doing is I am making a diagonal push with my half round wire to the next marking. And then I'm going to, once again, carefully wrap my half round wire around. So I've got 3 wraps on this side, and then I've got, it's going to end up being 2 wraps here. And then I'm going to go ahead and jog over to the next marking. And then, once again, carefully rotate my bracelet. All right, see what I'm doing here? So remember last week after each wrap, I was squishing flat with my chain nose pliers, but I am, for this project, going to squish flat after I do a couple. So you absolutely still want this to squish flat, but you're not going to squish flat every single time. So time has come for me to tear my painter's tape off here. Leave it where it is. You want to keep it so you can still see the markings, because I'm going to transfer my markings like that. So it is your choice when you actually bring up your painter's tape and move it. So you can see that I'm just kind of moving my wire over, and you have to be really careful when you get to this point that you are keeping your half round part where it should be. Is this all making sense to everyone, I hope? So when we taught this class, we always made sure to do the one that we did last week, where it's just the individual sections of half round wire before we do this one. It is a much easier transition if you have already hey Jason. So I may have received cupcakes yesterday from a certain friend of mine, which was awesome. I had one today with breakfast as well. Yes, there are excited noises in the background. So I am just making sure that I am continuing to wrap on the same side, because the diagonals should all be on the top side. You've created the top side by making your first wrap. And as I'm going, I do want to go behind myself and squish my binding wires as I go. Yes, it does sound like a good friend, Jason. Doesn't it, though? But it was a lovely surprise, and I very much am enjoying the cupcakes. And no, I'm not sharing them because I am a selfish bee, and that is okay. I was told I didn't have to if I didn't want to. So, hey, Silvern! All right, so it's time for me to, because I'm about to come up to this second piece of tape, so I'm going to just carefully tear that and leave it stuck to my wires. And this is partly why I make sure to squish the tape to the wires. If something happens and you tear up your tape and it disappears on you, your worst case scenario is you then have to pull out your ruler again and do your markings again with the ruler, and that's okay. So the thing about this bracelet is, even if these are not perfect, it looks so cool that no one's going to call you on it. And if they do, then if you're currently wearing it, the secret is to just kind of gracefully pop them in the nose with the bracelet, because they have to get really close to see all that. And I think it's justified to pop someone in the nose with a bracelet if they are insulting it. So there. And don't worry if you are not covering your Sharpie marks exactly, because they come off easily with rubbing alcohol or denatured alcohol, or if you are me, with your fingers, sometimes before you want them to. So we definitely want to just make sure that we are keeping our half round side facing the outside, and whoops, and our round side facing the bracelet, or the flat side, not round side, the flat side facing the bracelet, because the flat side has more kung fu gripping action, and that's what we want here, because the object of the half round wire is to bind the wires together. And I love mixing silver wire in with this, because the half round silver wire is not overly expensive, and you can get a whole bunch of silver in there for relatively small price jump, which is really, really nice. But I have no idea where our half round silver has been cleaned up to. It is somewhere in a safe location here at Beading Dreams, which is sometimes useful and sometimes not. Safe locations are good, but this is like a witness protection kind of location. I personally have a tendency to store things in witness protection locations on occasion, and so we don't judge about that. But let me know if you are one of us who stores things in witness protection locations, because it's a whole thing. And if your wraps are not as close together as you would prefer, you can always use the sides of your pliers to squish them together. And I've got some more wires to squish down. I've gotten, the shorter the wire gets, the faster it goes. Thanks, Ace. So you're always going to end up with 3 wraps on the back side, and then you'll have 2 visible ones on the front side, and then your diagonal. It's going to look like 2 because your third goes like this instead of straight up and down. And I'm almost done. This is a very exciting one because this one actually is faster, if not easier, because there's no cutting and starting again. And you always, if you do have trouble with your tension, because a lot of us do have trouble with tension on wire wrapping of this type, if you have trouble, that's what your hemostats are here for. Your hemostats can help you. Your hemostats can help keep the wires flat and not bunching. So if you do have trouble with your tension in any way, use your hemostats. Tools are for using. So it's not cheating to use tools at your disposal. I've heard a lot of jewelry makers say, well, I cheated and I used such and such. Why is that cheating? It's there. It exists. Why are you not supposed to use it if it exists? If it exists and it makes your life easier, please do the thing. Use the thing. All right, so I'm on my last couple here. So what I'm going to do is, instead of following my marks exactly, I am going to cheat slightly and wrap before them. And as you can see, this is actually a shorter distance than the one before it, but if you don't tell anyone, they are not going to notice that. But I just want to make sure that I have plenty of room here at the end for my hook. So again, I'm just cheating a little bit, making these last 2 slightly shorter. And again, since this is my last wrap, I'm going to go ahead and finish with 3 wraps on the front. See? Now I am making sure I'm on the back side of my bracelet where I don't have any diagonals, and I'm going to cut my wire. And again, if you are cutting your wire, you want to make sure that you are using the blade closest to where you want your cut to happen. Because if you are not, if you are using the blade away from where your cut is supposed to happen, then it's just going to happen where it happens. So if you're going for precision, you want to know where the blade side is of your wire cutter. If you don't know, then the way to tell is to squeeze your wire cutter closed, and all wire cutters, all side cutters like this, are going to have a blade side where the 2 flat parts come together, and you'll have a convex side, or concave side rather. I get them confused. It's one of my things. Some are dramatically concave, like this pair of wire cutters, that is a cave right there. So it's really obvious. But if it isn't obvious to your eyes, wire cutters are not going to be completely ruined if you touch them. So it's okay to touch this with your hands, and you're not going to cut yourself either. So this feels nice and smooth where these blades come together. This, obviously there's a divot there, so just make sure that this is what is facing wherever you want your cut to be. So now I've got all my wrapping done, and I want to make sure I go back and squish my binding wire into place with my chain nose. I am careful when I do this that I am not squishing this wire. The diagonal wire will not actually get pretty when you squish it. So you just want to squish the wire that's binding everything. The most important ones to squish are going to be the ones at the end. So the one where I made 3 and 3. All right, so now it's time to make this into a bracelet. So my first step is to bend all my open ends of wire at a 90-degree angle back toward the back side of the bracelet. So I am just pretty much bending them at the binding wire. And you can even use the binding wire to push against just a little bit, but be gentle when you do that, because you don't want to. So if you want shine on this design, you mean like bling? You could conceivably wrap a wire around here that has beads on it. You could also try to do a variation of the bling bangle like we did before. And I don't actually have a bling bangle with me. But you could do that. You could potentially do a bling bangle with, so another thing that you can do is you don't have to do a continuous wrap like this. You could do a section like that, and then this section here could have beads in it, and then back and forth. The only thing you're going to need to work on when you do that is having beads in between your square wires here in the middle is an extra level of challenge. But remember, I taught that class 2 weeks ago. So all you have to do is go back, or it was either 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I can't remember, but it was a Wednesday night, and I did teach square wire wrapped bling bangle. So that's what that one is called. So if you like this idea, but you want more beads, then that is going to be your better bet than this particular design. You could do this design. Thank you, Corvus. Yes, you absolutely can rewatch any of those on YouTube, or it should still be archived on Twitch as well, because Twitch archives for at least a month or two. But all of my free ends, I'm just bending back toward the back of my bracelet. I've got that end and that end. All right, so I am going to begin with the twisted wire ends here, and I'm going to cut them one at a time. So I'm going to cut them to a length of about 3/16 of an inch, and cut them one at a time, because if you get the length wrong on this, it's going to make your life harder than it needs to be. And if you get your length wrong, then you can rule out the exact length that you just cut. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to grip just the end of that wire, and I'm going to curve it just enough, so maybe if I get it on stream, I'm going to curve it down just enough so when my next move happens, and I just use my chain nose pliers to bend that wire down, that you end up with this kind of construction. So that was a perfect length, probably because I've done this before. So about 3/16 of an inch is your sweet spot for this. So a generous 1/8 of an inch. If you do not have a 1/16 of an inch on your ruler. So once again, I'm just curving the end, and then I'm going to bend the whole thing down, because we want that curved end facing the inside of your bracelet, inside/backside. And I'm going to do the same thing on this end. The reason I start with the other end is because the other end is so much easier to cut each one individually, so you can test your length and make sure that's the right length, because this one, they're so close together, it's a little easier to cut them at the same time. And again, I am trying really hard to make sure that I am controlling the ends of my wire. So I've got my cut happening, and I've got my hand over my wires, so I don't have these little ends flying out at anyone, because they will hit people, but it's really hard to aim. So you might hit them in the eye, or you might hit someone you like. You're more likely to hit someone you like than you are to hit someone you would prefer to hit, in my experience. All right, so again, on this end, I'm going to just make a curve and bend that wire down, and do the same thing on the other side. Make a curve, bend that wire down. All right, so now I'm going to form my little hook. So here we are. This is the front side, the outside of the bracelet. I'm going to take my chain nose pliers on the very, very end of this little V end, is what I've been calling it. And I'm just going to, at the very end, just bend it slightly up toward the outside of the bracelet, kind of like the ends of skis. And the reason we do that is because then when I do this, and I bend the whole thing backward toward the end, or toward the back of the bracelet to make a little hook, that hook is so much easier to fasten with that little swoop at the end than it is without. And all of this is in service of making a wearable bracelet, because if you've gotten this far and you can't put your bracelet on, that's a sad day. Now you can absolutely use a mandrel or a dowel to shape this. I don't have a mandrel or a dowel with me, and I will freely admit that even with a mandrel or a dowel, this always ends up with some hand shaping at the end anyway. So I am confident in my ability to shape this into a circle. You can use a shampoo bottle, you can use a lotion bottle, anything that's a circle in your house that can stand up to having something bent around it will work absolutely fine for this. And it doesn't have to be the right size, because this wire is stiff enough so it will spring back out. You want to make your circle smaller to begin with than you actually want, because again, soup can would work, but it would be too big for this, Lori. I would prefer, if you're using something like a can for food, a tomato paste can would actually be a better size, because you want to make a smaller circle than you actually need, because it will spring back out. But I just used my fingers to shape that, and I made a pretty good circle, and no one's really gonna examine it too closely. And again, if they do, you can always use the pop them in the nose trick. So there we have it. I've got a finished bangle bracelet, faux bangle bracelet, with this pretty little pattern of wire on it. So again, the pretty little pattern of wire serves the dual purpose of binding the wires together and being pretty. And that's it. Any questions? Thank you, Lori. So now I have a set. These two will go really nicely together, and they are actually going to go to my mom's jewelry wardrobe. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. It's true. And, you know, if they're really asking for it, then... Thank you. I love this technique. It's so fun, and these, even if they're not made out of expensive wire, really stack nicely with stretchy bracelets or with expensive pieces, because, you know, you've got this metallic shine to them, and I really love how the copper and bronze age. So what usually happens is the copper obviously will darken first, and the bronze, the twisted wire especially, will darken, and you can see the really great texture in the twisted square wire. But if you hit it with a polishing cloth or a polishing pad, that will bring out all the shinier bits and make it really look awesome again, and it's super easy to do. So thank you all for being here with me today. My name again is Heather. I am here from Beading Dreams in Dallas, Texas. We are a brick and mortar retail bead store. My boss Allison is very frequently the one here in this spot teaching. Thanks for being here. It was good to see you. And you do seriously get extra points for spelling Wesley correctly. So good job on that one. thank you for being with us today. We sometimes have, every other week, we have a podcast that we will film after this tutorial. This is not the week for the podcast, but stay tuned next week, and we will be doing another episode of our podcast. Love you, Rune. It's so good to see you. And yeah, we love you all. We'll be back tomorrow evening at 6:30 p.m. Central Time in the U.S., and we will be doing a live merchandise sale. If you are interested in buying things or just want to hang out with us, we actually don't require you to buy anything to be here. But if you are interested in buying things, please join us back here, 6:30 Central Time in the U.S., and we will be showing bunches of awesome things that you can purchase, and I will send to you soon. I am actually catching up because Allison is back in the store. She had a good week off with her family, but now she's back and I can do my real job. And so I am trying my very hardest on invoicing and shipping. So a bunch of you will receive things soon. If you have any questions, we do have a Discord. I can't actually post I don't have the command because Corvus is helping, but our Moobot said it was too tired to work anymore, and our Nightbot is now thankfully working thanks to Corvus, because Corvus is amazing. We do have a Discord. Please join if you have any questions. We're more than happy to answer them there or here or wherever, and we really love you. Thank you for being here with us. It's been amazing to meet so many wonderful people from all over the world during the pandemic, and we're not looking to stop anytime soon. We treasure all of you and our time with you. So thank you so much for being here, and we will see you again tomorrow night. Friday night we're having a fire tutorial with Allison, and it is going to be a doozy. It's going to be an awesome octopus sun catcher. So I think everyone is going to enjoy watching that, even if it's not something that you want to make. But I'm looking forward to it, and you should be too. Thank you so much.